technical difficulties at the start, but I'm here with Jamie Schreiner Biddle.
Jamie Schreiner. There's no.
No Biddle.
There's no. The Biddle's gone.
All right, let's restart that. Cut. Take two. Action. Hey everybody.
Hey.
John McCombs here with Smart Topics, Dumb Comics. I am here with Jamie Schreiner.
Hi.
Thank you,
everybody.
Jamie, for coming on. Today, you're our second guest.
I feel honored because I feel like you said Smart Comics, Dumb Topics. I feel like it's like Dumb Comics.
It is Smart Topics, Dumb Comics.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Because I was making sure I heard it right. Because I think that there's a reason I'm number 2. I'm not
very disparaging to all my guests.
Yes,
actually.
I am. I was looking at the Wikipedia article on my topic before this, so that I could be ready to just really shine, really show my knowledge.
For those of you who don't know about Jamie, she is a comic based out of Chicago. Hilarious. Does a lot of musical comedy.
Oh, thank you. That's nice.
And we were just on a show a couple days ago.
Yeah, it was.
You crushed it, you know.
I had a fun time. I just was really scared because it was like a weed show. I don't know if anybody is familiar with like anytime I call a show a weed show, it's like a show where everybody is like smoking weed or there's weed available at the show. I feel like they've made these a thing, and I just don't necessarily know that it ends up being as conducive for comedy as we initially planned.
Well, you know what? You did well because we were both selling merch afterwards, and people were buying yours and avoiding eye contact with me. So,
I'm so sorry.
It's all good.
I think I was in the sweet spot while they were like high, but hadn't gotten too high yet.
Yeah.
Because I think I was like probably second or third on the show, so that'll do that. Because that's the thing is, once they get too high, it's over. I know, like, I did one, it was like a 420 event, like, similar thing where it was like people had booths and they were like selling weed, but it was like all AFAB people, and it was me and Marilee, and it was me and then Marilee, and it was like, as soon as I started, I was like, I should never have done, like, I tried to hold my own as best I could, but it's like, also, I feel like as somebody who does music, those events are hard for me because they like hotbox the room, and then I'm like coughing, trying to sing. I'm like, so yeah, I think it was like I agreed to do it, and then I looked at the posters. I was like, oh crap, this is a weed show. Like I got kind of scared because I was like, yeah, I think it's a thing where it's high people, like it's almost like an avocado. Like you got to hit them at the perfect time, or they're gonna be too high.
But you know what? I mean, enjoying music when you're high is one of life's simple pleasures.
It's true. That is true.
And I brought you on today because I wanted to talk about musical theater.
Yes.
Well, you've put that as your topic, and if there's anybody who's going to talk about musical theater, it is the music comedian.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we can. I don't even know where to begin with that topic. So.
Well, so I would like to think that I know a fair amount about musical theater. I did get 2 degrees in musical theater, so I'm definitely paying for my knowledge in musical theater still. So I will say it's crazy though, because even with the musical theater degree, you only have 1 semester of musical theater history, and I feel like that's kind of more so what I was trying to talk to you about, because I feel like it's like such a broad topic. There's so many things to talk about.
Yeah.
That like one of my favorite tangents of musical theater is musical theater Broadway gossip. Like how Christian Borle cheated on Sutton Foster with Laura Bell Bundy during the production of Legally Blonde the musical.
Like
and then she cheated back with young. Yeah, I'm like, these are all names. These are people. But yeah, there's a lot of juicy Broadway gossip. But I feel like musical theater, the thing that's important to know, I'm sure you know this, and a lot of people understand that it's a show where there's singing and there's dancing, and then there's some dialogue sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think that the thing that is interesting, the most interesting thing to me about musical theater is how it's evolved over time. Like, I think in I don't really actually know what time this, okay, so like the golden age of musical theater would be like the 1940s, 1950s, after the Great Depression. So you had like your Sound of Music, you had all the Rodgers and Hammerstein stuff, like they did Cinderella, they did
Is there like an escapist thing to that? Like with the war going on and people are like, oh, we don't want to think about this horrible shit, so let's
because I think
be my lady tonight.
I was gonna say, I know that Showboat and like all of the musicals that came after Showboat were made during the Great Depression. And I remember that, so like, we've seen every single like period of musical theater, the casts get smaller and smaller. And it's for budgeting reasons, because pre-Great Depression, you would have these enormous like opera style casts. You would have like the chorus itself alone, I think, would be like hundreds of people. I might be exaggerating on that, but like, you had a really fucking big cast. Whereas like, you go to most musicals on Broadway now, you're lucky if there are like 15 people in the cast. They try as much as possible to make the cast smaller because it costs less money to make. And I think Showboat, I remember, was the first time that they started using like popular music of the time to inspire the style of the music. Because before that, it was like opera, operetta. Yeah. Like basically the musical as we know it is just kind of like the bastard cousin of the opera. Yeah. It was like if you took opera and vaudeville and they're like, we're gonna make something that's like, because I think vaudeville was not family friendly, and they wanted to do something that was like pop culture vibe, but you could take your kids. Yeah. Which is not the case for all musicals anymore. Like, I mean, I remember being in high school and like tricking the chaperone on our New York trip with choir to taking us to see Next to Normal, which was like not appropriate for our age group at all. Like, so it's like, it's one of those things, it's like, it ebbs and flows with the times. But I guess to get back to the point, like in the Great Depression, yes, it was, how do we get people in seats? Because like, I think the thing too is it used to, like, during the Great Depression, from what I recall, people were not able to do, like, they weren't able to put on shows every night of the week. Yeah. So like these actors and actresses and dancers and singers that were in the musicals, it was like they suddenly were doing one show a month instead of like 5 nights a week. And so I think they were able to like put out new stuff more frequently. I might be wrong on that. I feel like I know more about 1950s onward, because I do feel like it's like, no offense to the people who are into that, but unless you're like kind of a nerd, people in the musical theater circles don't really care about operas and operettas anymore, because most of the revivals that are happening are like 1950s onward. Yeah. Just because, again, I think with the economic situation we're in now, we're seeing a similar thing where it's like, how do we get butts in seats? And a lot of the times it's like, we're going to revive Oklahoma with like a racially progressive cast, and that's their way of...
For me, it was more so like, oh, I can't afford the tickets. Like, I wanted to like take my mom to go see Hamilton.
Oh yeah, no, Hamilton.
And like, I can afford for one of us to go see Hamilton.
Yeah. Both, not so much. Well, that's the thing that's wild too, is it's like, so within musical theater, within New York City as well, I would say going to see shows off Broadway and off Broadway, that's going to be the most... It's kind of like you see it with anything in America. Like, you're going to see the most raw, real, creative version of that. Because as soon as somebody from Broadway sees that, they're like, how can we package this and make this marketable to the public? Like the greater public and tourists coming through New York. And that's when it has a high ticket price. Like, Hamilton was being workshopped off Broadway and touring, I think probably for 2 to 3 years before it went to Broadway. And like, that would have been the time to go see it. But nobody knows about those things then. Everybody goes to see stuff on Broadway.
So it's off Broadway, like the black actors and musicians, and then like Elvis Presley comes in and he's like, yeah, I'd like to do a musical about this shit. And then now we got Hamilton, but they're like, oh, black people, we just put like some black people in here.
I feel like that is a good metaphor. I would say, like, with Hamilton, actually, one thing that's very cool about Hamilton that I do remember this fact. So when Lin-Manuel Miranda was developing Hamilton, he took a very like collaborative approach, and he went to the ensemble and was like, we're going to build this choreography together. We're going to workshop these songs together. So everybody who was in the original cast, they actually like banded together as a union, and they were like, hey, we should get royalties on this show, because without us, there'd be no show. Like, we did this as a team. And I'm pretty sure they won their case. And so, like, anybody who was in that first Broadway cast of Hamilton gets, I think, like, anywhere from 1% to 5% of the residuals, like, so, like, most of those people, even if you were in the ensemble, like, you might not be able to never work again, but, like, that's a good monthly check. That show is still running, like, internationally. Because the thing, too, is that, like, it's similar to, like, with, like, if, for example, I think within food, you'll have, like, a regional chain, like Voodoo Donuts, for example. That was, like, the cool, edgy donuts in Portland. But then somebody saw that, and they're like, this is a very marketable franchise. And so then they found a way to make it streamlined so that they could open it at Universal Studios and open one in Texas and, you know, like, open them all over. And I feel like that's what happens within the musical theater world. They're like, the highest level is Broadway, but from Broadway, like, when they do the national tours, they will just cast people to fill those exact roles. They want them to hit those same marks every night. Like, they want the experience to be the same experience that you would get seeing it on Broadway, just with this cast that's nationally touring. And it's like, the people in national tours are super, super talented, but it is a science, and it is, like, it's very capitalistic in a way compared to, like, the stuff that you see in development. That's when you're going to see the most, like, organic, creative version of it. And that's something that, like, I do find, I mean, and it's just the nature of art in this country. It's stand-up as well. Like, the version that you see at a showcase is going to be completely different than, like, the finished product of a special. Yeah. So I think that, but, like, within musical theater, I think that we're reaching this kind of, this point in terms of, like, the themes of the show, where either, and this is kind of cool actually, you either, if you're going to revive a show that's already been done, you have to have a new angle or a new approach, or, like, a role that's always been played by a man, we have to cast a woman, or, like, somebody who would not normally be that role. I like that they're doing that with revivals. And then as far as, like, new work, I feel like it has to say something really, really groundbreaking, or talk about a topic that hasn't been covered yet. Or alternatively, we're just doing shitty jukebox musicals. We're like, what if we took the last 10 years of pop music and made it into a musical from this, like what if we took this movie and we made all the songs popular music? And I am coming for a specific musical that I'm not going to name, but I do think it's like,
I think I know the one you're talking about. I think I know the one you're talking about.
Which one do you think I'm talking about?
Nah, probably, well, I don't know. Probably not. But I feel like I'm going to get hate if I say what it is.
What is it?
No, I can't do it.
No, like, say it.
Because someone
really loves it, and they get their heart broken, and they never listen to the podcast again because they're
like... there are also people, I'm sure, who are, like, maybe tuning into this episode, like the Well Actually crowd, and they're like,
yeah.
You like the mainstream musicals. Is there that level of, like, oh, you like Wicked when you fucking basic?
Yeah, there is that, but I love Wicked. I think Wicked is awesome, and I think, honestly, my snobbiness and my thing I need to work on, and I actually was having a conversation with the person I'm dating about this the other day, because he told me I was being a snob for this point of view. I really hate when it's a jukebox musical and, like, or an adaptation of a movie, and we haven't done anything new. Like Mean Girls, I like that they at least wrote new songs. But it's like, I'll just say it, the Moulin Rouge musical. I feel like this is a plot of a movie that we know and it exists. We're using, like, top 40 music that everybody's known. Yeah. And I'm sure, like, I understand that it's a really, really good escapist piece, because you're going and you're hearing your favorite songs that you know the words to. You're like, baby, you're a firework. And you're seeing this story that you've seen the movie before. But I'm kind of like, can we make a new thing? Yeah. That's my pettiness. That is my snobbiness. I want a new story. Or even if it's a story that's been done, like, for example, Hadestown is a beautiful example of how you can take a story that's been done and do something new with it. Okay. That's my musical theater hill that I will die on. I'm like, I don't want to see the same thing again. Can we please, make something new? Because at a certain point, it's like, if we're just doing the same thing over and over again,
I mean,
the art form is dead then, and it's not dead. There's so many exciting new writers, exciting new performers. Like, there's exciting stuff happening. So when I see like, especially this is a huge thing in Chicago theater. When I see somebody do like a revival of Oklahoma with like exactly who you would imagine in the cast, I'm like, no, we didn't need to do that. It's a waste of money. It's a waste of time. It's a waste. But I understand that people who are older will pay to see that.
Now, is there a section of the musical theater audience that is like those like people who are like, no, Oklahoma was a white actor, it's always gonna be a white actor? Like, I don't imagine that exists in like the population that would go to see a musical where they would be like, God damn it, we can't have it like that.
I feel like it's more so like the people who watch movie musicals wanting it to be exactly like the movie musical, and you're like, it's a live show, it's just not gonna be the same. I think also like I will put my hand up and take responsibility for it. Like, I really, really hate when, I think that people who perform in musical theater, especially like people of color who perform in musical theater, have a right to hate Hamilton and think it's a cop-out, because it is a cop-out. It is inherently like a huge cop-out, because it's like we're telling the story of these like terrible people who were not kind to people of color throughout history, but then we're like, oh, but the people in the cast are not white, so it's okay. It's like, it's still not like, the source material is still not okay.
Yeah.
What I have an issue with is when like edgy white cis male open mic comedians are like, Hamilton's problem. I'm like, you make rape jokes. Like, please, please, pick a lane. Just pick a lane and stay in it. It's more just like, it's the hypocrisy of like, I feel like people will piggyback on hating on Hamilton when it's like, you don't even have the plot to, or the point of reference to have those feelings. Like, you're just trying to be edgy.
Yeah. Oh, that it's, popular to hate something that's popular.
Exactly. Yeah. That's, and I feel like it's also, it's like, I feel like, I don't want to misquote, I think this is maybe like an Avi Sanchez joke, but like somebody does a joke about like, it's really easy for you to hate on Hamilton watching it on Disney Plus when you can't pay for the tickets. And I'm like, yeah, I think that's the same thing as like when they started doing all these like Grease Live and Peter Pan Live, and it's like when it's something that is being streamed in the homes of people who like, not to be don't know the musical theater stuff, there's going to be a lot more criticism than like from people who are trained in musical theater. But I also think that people who are trained in musical theater are going to be critical for a different reason. It's just like, it's literally, it makes me think of like, I saw a TikTok that was like, would you rather be stuck in an elevator with a Disney straight or a musical theater gay? And it's like, both are terrible. Both are equally terrible. I mean, the Disney straight would probably have snacks, so like at least that's helpful. But like, I would not, there's going to be singing either way if you're stuck in an elevator with that person. So, I mean, I feel like one thing I did want to mention about musical theater from my dumb point of view that I think is really important is when I talk about like doing shows about stuff that matters, I do feel like in the 1950s, the golden age of musical theater, it was Sound of Music, it was State Fair, it was all these like happy, life is good, and like even when things were dark and twisted, like we ended up back in like everybody's happy, the end. Whereas like I feel like it was very cool that in like the 60s and the 70s and a little bit of the 80s as well, musical theater started to be like, but what about the Holocaust? Like it started to be a lot more heavier, and like people were like moving more sexually with their bodies, and like the women in the show were wearing less clothes. Like it kind of just really pivoted in the opposite direction after like years and years and years of happy, joy. You got some really dark, twisted musicals like Sweeney Todd and Cabaret and...
Well, I think like, pop culture in general made that shift around the 70s and 80s of like being more, like Taxi, Driver, and all those other like movies and whatnot. So a lot of the things that it makes me think like a lot of the topics that you're bringing up, are they reflective? They're not solely owned by the musical theater genre. I think they're reflective of like the larger society as a whole. We always say no new ideas in Hollywood, or no new movies are getting made. And like there are a ton of new ideas. It's just nobody wants to put up the capital to actually make those widely available to a bigger audience.
And it makes me even think of like, so one of the I think winners of Best Musical within the past, I think 2 to 3 years, it's a musical called A Strange Loop, and it is written by a black man from Detroit, and basically like the opening number is like a big black and queer ass American Broadway show. Like that's what they're singing about, and basically the whole musical is zooming in on and out of his struggles with being a fat gay black man who grew up in Detroit, and like what that means for him trying to write. And it was one that like, I remember I took Victoria Vincent to see it. If y'all aren't familiar with Victoria Vincent, she's my best friend in comedy and like hilariously funny. And I picked it out, and she does a joke about not being able to handle the That's So Raven episode on race, and I bring her to A Strange Loop, and she's just like, yeah, kind of wish I would have known that was what that was gonna be. But like the point I'm making is that it is this very, very innovative, subversive show. But I feel like even though it won Best Musical, it only had 1 year on Broadway run after that before it closed, just because it was hard to sell like this story that brings up all these difficult topics and has these difficult conversations to like the average New York tourist, because that's who's going to see these Broadway shows. So it's like, of course, for the average New York tourist, Wicked's gonna run a really, really long time. Chicago's gonna run indefinitely because the dancing and the lights and the feel of the show is one that people can hold on to and grab onto wherever they're from. And I think that's one of the things that I find the most sad about like modern musical theater, is it's like, we need to be telling these cool stories, we need to be taking risks, but people also have to think about what's going to be marketable. Are people going to come see my show? Very similar, honestly, to comedy in a way, because it's like you want to be true to your voice, but you also like being relatable, and relatability is what makes people laugh and makes people want to come see you. So it's like, I personally think the most interesting and profound and cool musicals are usually the ones that don't have a long Broadway run. Like even, to this day, one of my favorite Broadway musicals is a musical called The Scottsboro Boys, and it's a show that looks at the story of the Scottsboro Boys, which were, I think it's 12 African American men who were stopped on a train in Chattanooga in the 1930s because 2 white women accused them of sexual assault wrongfully. Like they were all on the same train riding illegally, but they made it they assaulted us thing so that they could get off, and then those men like went to jail and went through like, but they do it as a minstrel show. And so it was very edgy and very subversive, and like really kind of like slapped the audience in the fucking face, which I love, but I get the average New York tourist did not, especially I think the show came out pre-pandemic, so we were even less willing to have that conversation then. And so even though it was like nominated for Tonys, I think the show closed after 11 days.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Shit. So it's a thing that sucks too, is like, sometimes you can have the most brilliant idea and like the coolest show, but if people aren't ready for what you have to say, it can be a flop. And like, if you listen to Scottsboro, like if anybody listening, like go listen to the soundtrack, watch the YouTube videos. It's a fucking great show, but I think people weren't ready for what the show had to say.
Yeah, that's one of the things I was interested in knowing more about it. So like, as I understand it, like, for a comedian, for instance, when you want to like, our performances are live, but ultimately you're like, at the end of the day, I want to record this hour or however long material to immortalize it and then get rid of it. Is that the same kind of feel with like a musical? Because I'm thinking like something like that would be great to see, but does it exist in any kind of format that like random people could go and find it in?
Yeah, I feel like, so in general, like a live Broadway musical, unless the theater like or the artist who is the creator filmed it and like releases it at a later date on streaming, a lot of the times those full video, like the full videography version of the show doesn't exist. It's just highlight reels and clips.
Yeah.
Except for the occasional bootlegger, like especially Wicked. I remember, I mean, I hate to admit this, I remember for my birthday one year, my dad getting us like a bootleg DVD of Wicked, because it was not touring yet, and we loved the soundtrack and we wanted to watch the show, and so we watched this like shitty bootleg of Wicked the musical. So it's like,
where did your dad go to find that? Where did your dad go to find that?
Where does my dad go to find that? Probably eBay. I mean, my dad is like, I mean, this is not related to musical theater, but my dad is like hoarder extraordinaire, like, took me to flea markets all the time as kids. Like, he was way too into like antiquing and thrifting. So yeah, he probably just knew a guy who knew a guy and got this illegal.
I don't know why I'm imagining your dad going into like a black barber shop and like, yo man, I got this Wicked here for you.
Well, I mean, my dad is like, yeah, my dad has a lot of friends and connections that as a child I was like not aware that they were probably doing illegal shit. But as an adult, I'm like, yeah, like one of these dudes had to have been your connection for that. But like Scottsboro Boys, on the other hand, unless like I think in Chicago, I want to say like pre-pandemic as well, maybe like 4 or 5 years after the Broadway run, because like once the show's on Broadway and goes off Broadway, like regional theater companies, which is like regional theater companies are like professional companies but like in smaller parts of the country, they can pay for the rights to do that show. So it's like there was a production of Scottsboro Boys. I forget which theater company in Chicago did it, but I saw it live then, and then because some of my friends were cast in it, and then I also saw Scottsboro Boys. It went over to London, and I think it had a better run on the West End than it did on Broadway, which kind of makes sense because I feel like they were able to like be critical of America in a way that we're not able to be critical of ourselves.
Yeah.
So, that being said, like, yes, sometimes videos exist, and I think it's becoming more common, especially now with like the rise of streaming and everything. But I think usually the sad thing with live musical theater is like the show has to reach a certain level of success for somebody to pay to have it filmed in that way. Because it's like, if they don't think that selling the DVDs is like Cats, for example. Cats is however you feel about Cats has been around and was so successful in the 80s and 90s that they filmed the live show of it, and then they also made that terrible reboot that Tom Hooper directed, which is like, I always say, like, if you want to watch Cats, you gotta watch that live filmed version. But that live filmed version, like, it had a full production budget, and there has to be success in the marketability of the live show for them to be like, we're gonna invest money in filming this.
Yeah.
So it's like,
does it bother you like when they do a film version of a music, like a really popular musical, and you're like, why the fuck did they cast Russell Crowe?
Yeah, no, Russell Crowe, that bothered me a lot. I mean, there's so many things with musical theater that bother me, and I think probably like the biggest, I mean, but also the things that bother me about musical theater are things that bother me about all forms of media, and it's just like they will do what's the most marketable.
Yeah.
They will do what will make them the most money, and that's really sad to see, because it's like what ends up happening is, yeah, you cast Russell Crowe in a like fucking
Javert
movie musical,
and Les Miserables, and
and it's you know, there for example, Meryl Streep, she was in The Prom and she was in Mamma Mia. That is an obvious choice that can, in terms of marketability, that can also hold her own and carry a tune and act the hell out of the role.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, there are some times when it's like, oh, the most marketable person is also the person who's going to do the role the best. But when that's not the case and they just pick the most marketable person, it's kind of a facepalm. I know, like, I would say a lot of people feel that way about Ariana Grande doing the Wicked reboot, but I personally, like, now that I've seen the trailer, I'm like, okay.
But she's a solid, she's
a solid voice. But yeah, and the thing is, like, and people are like, oh, she can't act, but it's like, but she did that show on Nickelodeon or maybe it was the one show she was on, I think it was Nickelodeon. She started acting. She was acting before she was doing pop, so it's like, it is something that she's capable of doing. So I think for me, a lot of the reason why people were hesitant to have Ariana Grande do Glinda is because, like, the original Glinda, Kristen Chenoweth, is such a vibe, and it's such a specific thing, and I think people, like, they want to see that Glinda,
Yeah.
And so in a way, it's almost, they're doing the same thing that the movie musical people do, but like reverse. They're like, if she's not going to deliver it's like, yeah, she's not Kristen Chenoweth. Of course she's not going to deliver exactly that. And also, can we enjoy a new thing for what it is?
How many people were like, Helena Bonham Carter should be Glenda?
I think that like a few, when it's like, I feel like I just want, and this is with every art form, I want people to just like be excited about things for what they are. I feel like the same could be said for like when Hannah Gadsby's special came out and everybody was like speculating whether or not it was stand up. Or you could say the same thing for Bo Burnham's Inside. Like I'm like, if something has something to say in a way that is like not inciting violence on people,
yeah,
I think that we should just like appreciate it for what it is as an art form.
Yeah.
Like I think that like I used to say like if somebody has a message and it's not hurting anybody, then we should let it happen. But it's like I have to be careful because I feel like I said that on a podcast once and somebody's like, "What about Ben Shapiro?" I'm like, obviously I don't mean
this is not
I support
that.
No, this is not that. Like I'm not that person, not that podcast. I do think though that like I think that we put things into box. Like we don't like when we can't put a piece of art into a box.
Yeah.
And I think that we should be more open-minded as a society.
100%. Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And that just the fact that we talk about those things to this day, I think has accomplished something. Because, like, yeah, anybody can make the same special, can make the same jokes and, you know, be formulaic and just don't, you know, try to rock the boat. And no one's going to give a shit. In, like, a year or two, like, so many specials where I'm like, I couldn't tell you one joke from that special. But I'll remember the ones that I'm like, holy shit, this is a new thing. Like 3 Mics with Neil Brennan. I'm like, oh, this is something new and different that I really appreciate. Someone took a risk to try and do, you know, and Hannah Gadsby, same thing. Someone took a risk to try and do something different. So.
Yeah, with the art form. And I feel like within musical theater, to bring it back home, I forget which year this was, but there was one musical, or like 1 year for the Tony Awards, Best Musical was a dance show. It was a show with no dialogue, no singing. It was just the whole story was told through dance. And I remember people, like, in my theater class when we were learning about it, because it happened before I was born, but as people in my theater, they were like, that's bogus. Like, what? Can anything just be a musical then? And it's like, maybe yeah. Maybe yes. Like, I think for that time, like, that show was something new and exciting, and it warranted Best Musical at the time. And it's like, has a dance show won Best Musical since? No. But like that one happened to have enough merits that the Tony Award Board were like, yep, this is the best musical this year. And so I would like to see the same kind of attitude applied to like all the art forms. Just like, let's, you know, allow something to be genre defying, allow something to be unique within the form, and just appreciate it for what it is.
Yeah. One other quick question I wanted to address, because this is a pet peeve of mine about musicals, is that a lot of times, and this is specifically regarding movie musicals, where they'll put out a trailer and there's nothing musical about the trailer. And you will be hoodwinked into seeing a musical, and it's like, why didn't you just say at the beginning, like, this is what it is? I understand they're like, oh, well, people won't come maybe if we don't market it this way. But at the same time, like, that there's an audience for that. Like, do people just sit through a musical because they're like, well, fuck, I didn't know I was getting into this, so I guess I'll just, you know, fucking sit through Oppenheimer, the musical, and look at Albert Einstein tap dancing.
So I think, again, it's the same thing that I've been saying this whole time, which I think is so, like, art in a capitalistic society. I think that, yeah, they just want more people to come. Mm-hmm. They know it, that, I mean, Mean Girls, the one that just came out, it's exactly that. People were livid because they didn't know it was a musical, whereas all the musical people were livid.
Same thing with Color Purple.
Yeah, and it's like, and the musical theater people were livid because it wasn't enough of a musical. Like, they tried to do something in the middle to appease everybody, and they pleased no one. So I think basically, they don't care because they already got our money.
Yeah.
I feel so bad, but it's like, and for that reason, that's why I think that when it comes to like food and art and any of it, the best version that you're gonna get is gonna be the small business thing. It's gonna be the thing before they go before somebody with lots of money goes, how can we make more money off of this?
Do you have like a go-to spot in Chicago for seeing like new exciting musicals?
Yes. So it used to be Underscore Theater, RIP. They were COVID closed. I would say now I really recommend like so Theater Wit. Mm-hmm. It's like on Belmont.
Yeah.
Like down a bit. There's Theater Wit, and then there's like another space right next to it that I'm blanking on.
Stage 773.
Yes, Stage 773 and Theater Wit. They both tend to have like really, really cool, exciting stuff. I also think Pride Arts Films and Plays, which is in Uptown, they have lots of cool stuff. Like I'm going next week. I think I'm going to see they're doing like an all AFAB cast of Romeo and Juliet, which I'm like that'll be interesting to see at the very least. Like I can't assert yet whether or not it's going to be good, but it'll be interesting. And then I do think like in the suburbs, the big theater houses are like Marriott Theater. There's Paramount in Aurora, and then there's also what's the other one called? My cousin literally got married there. I can't believe I'm forgetting it. But there's a third one. It's like the big, equity houses. Those are like if you want to go see something that's like Chicago actors and actresses in a national touring level show.
Yeah.
Those are the places to go. But I do think if you want something that's more like black box, more indie, there's a website, it's theaterinchicago.com, and if you go there and just click Now Play, and you can see like all the current shows that are happening, so I recommend that as well. And yeah, I also recommend like if you see a title and you've never heard of it, and it says like new musical, go to that, because that person is trying to figure out if their show's good, and so you going is going to mean more than Andrew Lloyd Webber doesn't need any more money. He's literally a Disney villain at this point.
Well, and one of the things I appreciate as like being a comedian is I would say an artistic person. I do appreciate art form that I can't do. And so it's because I have no ego about it. I'm not like, well, when I watch stand-up, sometimes there's a bit of me like, I would have done that differently, or man, I wish I could have thought of that one thing. Yeah. But when I'm like, go to like an art show and I see someone paint this beautiful thing, or I see a live music show or anything like that, I really appreciate somebody, putting the time and effort to create this thing that blows my mind. I'm like, how did they do that? Like that. So I just recommend people. I know a lot of comedians, and a lot of comedians just hang out with other comedians.
And that's it. Yeah.
Like expand outside of that, open up your horizons, and see other art forms, because there's so much out there that like we don't see, we don't appreciate. So, and I'm glad that you came on to talk to us about it.
Yeah, no, of course. And I just amazing. I love supporting anything that's like local to a region I'm in, but like as somebody who lives in Chicago, like I think that like Chicago artists supporting other Chicago artists, and it's like as much as stand-up is like, dick and pussy jokes, it is an art form. Like, so when we take our night off, and instead of just like going to the 800th open mic, like go see somebody else's thing, we're gonna learn something that we wouldn't learn from watching our same friends work out the same jokes we've been seeing them work out all week. So yeah, I agree with you. I think that there's just like a lot to be learned from looking at the other art forms. And yeah.
All right. Well, Jamie, where can people find you, follow you?
So I'm on the internet, on Instagram and TikTok. You can find me at Jamie Schreiner Sings, because that's part of my act, as Jonna said. And then I also have a website, jamieschreiner.com. So either of those options are where you can see where I'm performing next and keep up to date with stuff I'm working on.
All right. Well, Jamie, thank you so much for coming. It's been an absolute pleasure.